Hello everyone, welcome to the Systems Within Systems podcast.
Though you've probably watched all that other stuff before.
Yeah, but if you're coming back, there's the four of us here today, Sifu Hill, Sifu Alex, me, Sifu Vic, and Sifu Moshe.
Moshe.
And here today we're going to talk about percussion punching, which is one of the core striking concepts that we use in our art. And I think a good way to start with that is just kind of differentiate it from conventional striking, right? And to kind of be fair before we get started, or kind of just be clear about this, right? This isn't, we don't want to talk about, what we're talking about today, we're not trying to differentiate ourselves, say anything's better or anything's worse. We just want to talk about the mechanics of it, how it works, and why it works. And at the end, Sifu will kind of open up the floor a little bit for anybody who's watching to kind of have the opportunity to come down and experience that more. So
it also comes into kicking as well.
Yeah.
Percussion kicking.
Yeah. So to start off with, let's talk about common mechanics, right? Like I think the way most people get taught to strike. So I come from a pretty broad array of martial arts backgrounds. I studied a lot of different kinds of arts, grappling arts, striking arts, all those sorts of things. And I think what I've been told going through a lot of schools that I've been in is that when you strike, the goal is to kind of use the momentum of your body, turn, and then drive through the target that you're hitting, right? So if my target's here, I'm hitting through it, and really the core concept or the way that the power is generated and transferred is through hitting through the target.
Which deals with stance,
Yeah.
whole body movement,
Yeah.
coming through all of that as well.
And you can generate a phenomenal amount of power and devastating strikes when you do that the right way. But to me, the percussion striking, honestly, is what drew me to the school in the first place, right? So maybe I'll start with a story of my own, right? Since we were talking about stories, right? So this goes back, it'll be 16 years this year. Actually, it's 16 years now. No, 15. It was 2010, right? Spring, winter of 2010. So at that point, Sifu was teaching a class at Rutgers, Intro to Shaolin Kung Fu, I think is what you called it, right?
And I remember.
I just gotten back into the martial arts. Rutgers had a lot of really great opportunities for like martial arts clubs and things to explore. So I was taking the chance to try and test out different schools, different styles, see what worked for me, see what I liked, see what I didn't. So I saw this Intro to Shaolin Kung Fu class, and
You can remember also how you were cocky, right?
Yeah, I was. And like many people my age, I grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. That was like all of my exposure to Kung Fu, right? So that's why I wanted to check the class out, right? Because the Avatar, a lot of the stuff that they use is based on Shaolin, not Shaolin. But like,
to be fair, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the philosophy, they actually do a lot of things very well.
yeah,
they did.
I agree. I think it's a very good show.
Except the airbenders. That doesn't, that's not.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Another
That's
podcast.
another
Yeah.
topic for another time.
Yeah.
So I want to check out the school. I came to the class, and
Now also, we're teaching SWS, so it's not Northern or Southern Shaolin
Yeah.
Kung Fu, but that's my.
that's what the
Our
art
group.
group. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was Sifu's base, right?
Right.
You know, these are things that we'll talk about more in later podcasts. But Systems and Systems itself is something that evolved from the study of many systems, right? And like I said, I have a pretty extensive background in Japanese arts, jiu-jitsu, judo, that sort of stuff.
Now Indian arts as well, right?
Yeah, and a lot of other things. I've done a lot of things. But Sifu comes more from Chinese martial arts, right? Shaolin, Tai Chi,
Northern and Southern
Hungar, Northern, Southern, all that stuff, right? So that's how he was teaching presenting the art at the time, right? So I went to this class, and I kept remembering you say hit from the core, right? That was the thing that triggered me, right? Because
I
I never
don't
heard,
use core anymore, the
Yeah.
word, yeah.
yeah. But that was the way you framed it at the time, and I'd never heard anybody say that before, right? Everyone had always told me when you hit, use your whole body, twist your hips, drive through the target, and hit, right? But you were talking about the energy wall, you were talking about hitting from the core, and I remember at one point you asked, does anybody here have any martial arts background? And I raised my hand and nobody else did, right? So I was a little cocky. I was like, all right, I'm the only guy here who has any background. This guy's saying stuff that I've never heard of before, right? What's it about? So at the end of the class, I came up to you, and I remember you were talking with a couple of the other students who were helping you teach. And I came up and I was like, you keep talking about this idea of hitting from the core. What does it even mean, right? Yeah, this little look on your face, right? I remember very clearly, a little smile. That smile right there, right? Kind of gave me a smirk. You're like, all right. And you placed your fist right on my chest. and he hit me with a percussion shot. And all I really remember feeling is that it felt like you stopped just short of like knocking the wind out of me and shutting me down, right? I have no other way to describe it. It just felt like a force hit me immediately. And I walked out of that class just like trying to figure out what that was. I was just sitting on the bus. I was just like, on the bus, like the entire ride back to my dorm, I was just sitting there trying to figure out what that was. And here I am 15 years later, right? So it's a very different kind of hitting mechanic, and it works off of something very different than a lot of what a lot of other arts do. So I think that's kind of a good starting point. Just kind of just explain what it was that you were doing there and how you kind of came to that.
Well, the SWS actually developed from Northern and Southern Shaolin, because at that time I was looking for real life combat. So I was involved with the Chinese martial arts, but then it started venturing into all types of different arts and different cultures. Like the Roman fighting, the African style fighting, the Kubigan, all of that stuff. And I realized that the SWS was expanding from that because of something as a young child, when I was like 14, 15 years old, when I went into it a little bit deeper, which I first started in Wing Chun, which was a very aggressive school for a Wing Chun school, because back then everything was a little bit more aggressive. I started my journey at that point. I was wondering, does this stuff really work? Mm-hmm. So you got to remember, when I came out on that time, Bruce Lee started just coming out. The movie or the show Kung Fu came out, and I'm seeing all this stuff. I'm saying, well, does that stuff really work? Because the guys I was fighting back then were really tough people. They were all bikers and some tough people there. And I'm saying they were all afraid of me. I was this young kid. I was fast. It was this, that, and the other thing. But I questioned, hey, if I met this guy and he didn't know who I was, like he's intimidated in the class, but I met him in an alleyway, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble. Because he's not, this guy, I'm training with him, or he's got fast hands. Like, could I actually hit him and stop him? And that's when I started questioning. So that's really where my journey began. And Bruce Lee came out with this thing called the 1-inch punch. And I saw that. And then throughout my life, I was trying to figure out really the dynamic of how the body works off of energy. So I had this concept of gamma rays. And my idea of gamma rays at that time was to create a Hulk, right? So the whole idea of that was, as I started viewing the body as energy. So I started looking not just externally at the body, but internally at the body, and how the body reacts to energy. So my concept back then was to shoot a gamma ray into a human being, and that human being would become radioactive. That's how I thought of it, okay? Right or wrong, that's how I thought of it, right? And when you make him radioactive, to me, it was like my energy overloading his energy. And then I discovered there was a lot of truth to that. And how it developed was through two things. One, drumming, because I've drummed my whole life, and the whole idea of the percussion that deals with it, and my father. So the first part was, it's like I viewed a drum head, and the drum head represented, like if you do paradiddles and stuff like that, and the drum head is really taut, like your stick just bounces off of it. And I said, well, why can't you do that to a human instead of pushing through? Mm-hmm. Now remember, guys, I'm taking you back many, many years. I've been doing the arts for over 50 years. You've been saying that. But, right, so it's a long time, all right? So I'm a youngin' here. But that's how long ago it started developing. And I saw the bouncing off of that. So why can't we do the same thing to the human body? Instead of pushing through, and anything you hit, if you hit and recognize the energy that's coming from that body, you always want to hit when it's cord, for the most part. And that's the first part of it. When there's movement and an adjacent to different movement, it even gets more dynamic. So like a lot of people will ask, when I first demonstrate the percussion punching, like I did with Vic, or when I'll put my hand on him, but it's really not putting the hand, that's just so he could feel the rings going on inside of his body. Because basically it works like a pebble dropped in water. You drop the pebble in, and that's the other way it developed. I was sitting by a lake one day, and I threw a pebble in, and I saw these rings go out from the pebble. And I thought about the Big Bang. I thought about things like that. Well, why can't our bodies work the same way? You know, developing energy that expands, which is what you felt when you got hit that way. And I do that lightly because I don't want to hurt anybody. But when I take it from a distance, it's actually more powerful. So the idea of a 1-inch punch that I think Mr. Lee was doing, that so many years ago, he would stare one inch, he would stand a particular way, and he would throw that punch, and it would do it. But what I do is way different, and it's also brought into Mortal Kombat. So first started with drumming, the idea of hitting something taut and it bouncing off of it, and then creating that drop in the lake that I saw and expanding. So like you guys have been, like you threw up almost one time, you know, stuff like that. Very lightly, sometimes I do it by accident, you know, like I've hit people by accident. I was just talking to a guy today, Rhino, and he said, yeah, I asked you about it and you hit me and you sent me 20 feet. He said, we should have got that on video. And I said, yeah, and then soon later you had a heart attack, so maybe it's not a great thing to do. But the whole point is that it's very real when you start viewing the body as energy. And what brought a reality into that more than anything, the pebble, trying to, am I doing a good job explaining it? Right? And the idea of the drum head. But there was still more. So my father was in the Battle of the Bulge. He also was a paratrooper, Seymour Combat, and you know, my family tends to be very aggressive as well. So the past, that's why they're no longer around. So the thing here is that he was in this Battle of the Bulge, and I could go into a little bit of the story. The tanks were going one direction, they ran out of gas, and they turned, and they wanted to avoid the paratroopers. You know, if you guys ever seen Band of Brothers, that was with like my dad's group. So they went to the more experienced ones, and when they went to the more experienced fighters, they just started bombing, like bombing the area just to get through there. And my father didn't have a lot of men, and he was a master sergeant, and he said, let's retreat, let's just go. And as they were running, he kind of said that he could see the tank shell go in right next to his foot. So he saw the tank shell go down next to his foot. He woke up after the explosion, which that would be considered a direct hit, so you're supposed to dissolve. Mm-hmm. You know, you're just gone, right? And the men around him that were running, there were some men that were dead, and he just woke up, I think, in a tree or next to a tree somewhere. So the tanks went by and thought he was dead, whatever it is, and he just woke up. Boom. Then later on, he goes to the camp where the men were, and he sat down, and he says he remembers drinking a cup of coffee, and then as he drank the coffee, he just went insane. He started bleeding from his ears, his nose, his mouth, anything that had a hole, he was leaking everywhere. And then he just went insane. He said the guys, he remembered grabbing his gun and just started shooting, and because he was just went berserk, and they nailed him down. He came out of the shock, and when he went to the hospital, they found out that his lung, the side that he got hit on, completely dissolved. It just evaporated, and all he had was a piece of the lung hanging from one end to the top, right? And then later on, years later on, it found out that his liver fused with his gallbladder. Right? And when we went to do the surgery, they were fused together. Right? The power of that explosion should have killed him. But what struck me on it was that the percussion it went through his body. So he had shrapnel in his body as well from it that was stuck, you know, that they couldn't get out. But it just went through him, and it killed the men that were around him. And it really started resonating with me how energy works, and our bodies are made up of energy. And there's a lot of philosophy I could bring into here, but you want me to keep from that. So we'll just stay with the idea of focusing without focusing, and we'll get more into that stuff as we go down. But when I used to do combat, the idea of focusing without focusing, I stopped looking at people because I fought some scary people back then, you know, like scars and bigger. There was no range of fighting, plus also on the street. And I started viewing people as energy. So I look at the body and I see the body, but I view the body as something that you hit to cause an energy movement within the body, to uproot the energy, like what I was saying with the gamma rays in the beginning. If I'm 100% and you're 100%, and I could throw 100% of my energy into you, then it offloads your energy. And that was my concept of how I started developing percussion punching, basically off of like what Mr. Lee used to do with the 1-inch punch, but only bringing it into being able to use it anytime, anywhere. And it really is very effective and very dangerous if you can learn it. You know, and it's not an easy thing to learn. I will say that. It's not an easy thing to learn, but you'll see, you feel it, you recognize it. And if you're standing there and you're standing in front of it, it's a whole different ballgame. And that's why I'm not going to really demonstrate it here. I'm going to invite people to come down and see it. That's what the whole podcast is about now.
So one thing I want to, maybe the next thing to move to then is, how do you begin to train that then? Looking at it compared to other kinds of hitting.
Well, that's the point, that you got to be standing in front of it.
All right. Well, like what are the tools you use to teach it?
Energy walls.
All right, so explain that.
So, an energy wall is your imagination in one sense, but it really isn't. It's gravity. So, the energy wall you're looking at is we just take the idea of what that is. Okay, so explaining the punch in itself. The punch could be taken from here, it could be taken from here, it could be taken from here. It could be taken right on the body, which is what I did to you, to play it safe. If I pull the punch a little bit further, not like Mr. Lee when he was doing the 1-inch punch, if I take it and I pull it further, it's even more destructive. All right? It's even more powerful than doing it. That first thing is the center so that you can experience what it is, and then I'll come from different angles with that, you know, hitting. So it really starts at first looking at gravity. Say this is gravity, and this is your punch, right? So this is a meteor, right? And the meteor is hitting into gravity. It's hitting into just gravity. As it hits into gravity, it's trying to form a black hole. So as it's doing this here, and of course we got a physics guy here, so just shut up. So at this point, don't get all the technical stuff. At this point here, because you're going how I developed it, right? So I looked at gravity as, at that time they were saying it was a weak force. I never saw gravity as a weak force. I always saw it as so very powerful. But now they're saying things different. So maybe, you know, the systems with the systems is coming out more. But anyway, it would fold in. So the human body, okay? The human body, it would fold in and the human body fights back. The energies of the human body fights back. And what happens is that it's trying to form this black hole, but it's too strong. Gravity is too strong for it. It pushes back. Boom! That's the explosion. That's the Big Bang. Right? So I look at each body, and I look at that also philosophically as each human being as a galaxy. It's a thing to investigate, the thing to learn, right? And we have all these chambers within the brain, which is what the last podcast was. But sticking with this, here, you come in here and it pulls you back. That to me is the percussion that went through on my father. And also on the drum head. It just, because it radiates, it's different than just hitting to the body. You're hitting internally, you're hitting in the body. And no matter how big you are, what great shape you're in, how tough you may be, you feel it. You understand it. And that's the whole point of what we're doing here, is I want to invite people down. We set up this whole thing on this new
Email.
where you could email, and then I'll construct for all you guys that want to, what I'm asking for as far as doing that, just to go a little bit further into that, I'm asking for people that are physically in shape, that do mixed martial arts, boxing, anything like that, that have some background in it. Size, weight, doesn't matter as long as you understand something about combat and fighting. It could be a Navy SEAL, it could be anybody, basketball player, tennis player, anybody wants to come down and really experience what this is about. Now it is hard to learn, there's a lot of techniques with it, but the idea of looking at the body as energy and hitting the energy all started from dropping that pebble, right? And a drum head. And I don't know which started first. I think it was the pebble when I threw it in there and I saw the rings. And a lot of people experience those rings within them because your body is made up of energy. And the energy, we're always focusing externally. I focused internally. And that's where those hits could come in this way, this close, you know, which you guys will experience if you come down. You can come out here. Now, so to explain it more, when you're talking about the body as a universe, right, as its own system, it's center line. So anywhere down the center line is first where I start to experiment to let you guys, which is what I did to you. But it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could hit here, it could hit on the elbow. It's in everything, but how you direct that is going to be differently. But so that the idea of the hitting is not pushing through, it comes right to it. At that point, when it comes to, like the gravity, looking at the energy wall, you become the energy wall. So I believe when you practice, you always have to practice with the same sincerity. Practice shouldn't be practicing like you're going to get good or you're hitting something. It should be practiced like with the same aggression that you would practice it in real life. Your practice should always be real. And that's where the energy walls come in, and I could get more into explaining that when people come down. Because, you know.
As a side note on the concept of energy in the body, right? When we say energy, we're not talking about something mystical or
No.
spiritual. There are many different kinds of energy in the human body, you know, thermal energy, gravitational energy, kinetic energy. You have blood rushing through your veins. You have chemical energy of the nerves. Of
And all
the
that I
ATP.
attack.
All of that
Yeah.
forms a collective, coherent energy, quote unquote, that is very reactive to all kinds of stimuli.
And it's also even in the time, you know, I used to, when I was doing a lot of fighting, I'm a small guy, you know, but I look a lot bigger when you're in front of me that way. But back then I was a little crazy, and people used to throw punches at me, and I used to take my head and smash it into their punches and break their hands, you know, because I was able to direct the speed that it was coming at and not push into it, just boom, use the same technique, because your body can also block. You know, that's not advisable, but I'm just saying that was a journey that led me to where I am today. But what these hits are different is they hit, and as soon as they touch, they come off. And that's where the explosion, that's where the percussion comes in that I felt that my father experienced, because he should have been dead.
So maybe add a little bit, going off what Alex was talking about, what you're talking about, a little bit of like physiology and the mechanics of it, right? So one of the things that comes in with the body is you have what's called viscoelastic deformation, something they taught us in biomechanics, right? Very fancy word. What it basically means is the body molds to force, right? So like you ever see those slow motion videos of people getting punched, and you see like their entire face just like it shifts sideways and it snaps back, right? What that is, that's the mechanical structure of the body. Alex was talking about all the different kinds of energy and tension in the body. That's the mechanical structure of the body offsetting force, right? It just does that naturally by how the structure of your body like is designed and exists, right?
And yet, if that same thing is happening inside the body, it's very...
So it makes it harder to hurt someone, right? If their body's able to offset your hit, then your hit's going to lose effectiveness. And that's what you see all the time, right? People just keep throwing hits and throwing hits and throwing hits, and the person doesn't go down. It's because the body itself is absorbing that. And that's not just including things like, you know, if someone's hopped up on adrenaline, or if they're on drugs, if they're physically very dense. Like, this is why we call this guy the Hulk, right? He's just physically very strong. Right, so you're hitting somebody like this, you're not going to really hurt them in the same way.
And you experienced that hit, and what did it feel like?
More than a few times.
Yeah.
Right? Or the other story you were telling before about the little guy who got hit by the big guy, and he just moved with it and then came back up. So that entire force, it was a much bigger guy hitting a much smaller guy. The small guy moved with the force of the hit because he could just kind of let his body go.
That was it.
Right? Pop back right up with a knife and just cut the guy's throat.
Yeah.
And really, if you want to see a good example of that happening, anybody with a dog, if you ever watch your dog playing or ram into your wall or doing whatever, you can see that happening. Yeah, that's a very simple way to kind of get an idea of what Vic's talking about. Dogs are very good.
Animals are very good.
Animals in general.
Animals just
Very elastic.
they just do
The
what
animal
they
you're
do.
most likely to have, probably a dog, you can see they're very good at moving, how do you phrase it?
Moving with force.
Moving with force, molding their body.
And that's the thing, right? Animals do it naturally. They have less upper level brain stuff, so they're just kind of very naturally in tune with their bodies by how they are. So with the hit, the goal is to short circuit all of that.
Yeah,
Right?
just
What we're really trying to do is destroy what you're hitting. And I think about blast waves, right? So when you have an explosion, right, there's stages of a blast, right? There's what's called the primary blast wave, the secondary blast wave, tertiary, quaternary. It goes out pretty far, right? And each one of them describes a stage of impact. So the primary blast wave is the actual expansion of the explosion as it hits you, right? So what happens when we have any sort of high velocity explosion is that we have whatever explosive that you have. The bonds of that explosive break and it releases a lot of energy very quickly. So that energy moves through the surrounding space and just expands outward. So when you're talking about your dad, and you're talking about the explosion that hit him, I think he was so close, my hypothesis, is he was so close to the
he said he saw
explosion.
it go right into his
Yeah.
by his foot.
He was so close to the explosion when it went off that he got hit by the primary blast wave before he got hit by anything else.
And it just dissolved. It's almost like, to me, at the
Yeah.
time, what I was looking at, it just moved through him.
Yeah.
And it's like this field, this energy field moved through him, dissolved his lung, moved his liver over to his, gallbladder, which they didn't discover till later, and did a lot of other damage.
Yeah.
So when he woke up, he couldn't see, speak, hear, nothing. He was completely, and somehow he recovered.
It's incredible.
He recovered,
Really
and he went right back into combat. Right?
I'm sure not right back into combat.
Here, no, as soon as he was well enough to
Discharged.
move around, he just went right back into. Back then, you were fighting World War II. You went back.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you want to fight? You go back.
Yeah. A guy, especially a guy with that kind of experience.
Yeah.
So the primary blast wave is that expansion of the explosion itself. The secondary blast wave is things that get moved with the explosion and hit you.
And that's what happened to the surrounding men.
Exactly.
That's why they died.
So I guess you can look at how a grenade, somebody can jump on a grenade and stop it from,
Yeah.
and totally stifle the explosion.
Yeah.
They die, but
Yeah,
but
they die.
They die, but that kind of, I
It-
guess,
It
in
tamps
an
the
inverse way explains what you're talking about a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So the idea here is that when you're hitting the percussion shot, how I think about it, right? Kind of going back to the mechanics of the hit. What I think about is I'm thinking about generating that primary blast wave. So if I push in, what I've done is I've actually taken my hand and I've moved through the target. And what that does is it dissipates some of that explosive force. Now I've created a secondary contact point, right? I've created a secondary explosion. I've pushed, rather than hitting purely with the force of the explosion, I've pushed my hand and pushed some of the mass into the target. And that bleeds the power off of the hit. So one of the things going back, so I also studied drumming when I was a kid, not to the extent that Sifu did it, but I was watching a video very recently that again helped me put it in context, which was very, very talented drummer, and he's an instructor in a college, I think, in Texas. But he was saying, when you hit with the stick, you don't control the stick, you control the recoil, right? And that's how those kinds of things started to help me kind of go into what you're talking about. In the same way, I start to put together what the percussion shot
And that's
was.
how drummers are able to drum very fast.
Yeah, because they're not worried about going down, they're worried about the back. Especially when you're talking about, you have that very taut drum skin, the stick basically bounces off. So in kind of the same way, when you're hitting with that percussive shot, the goal isn't to drive through, the goal is to create that resonance and that percussive back motion that creates the explosive ripple to the target, right? Those expanding rings.
Yeah.
And you're keeping that force, that blast within the target.
Exactly. So if you push and move, you can do that if you want to set someone up for something else. Let's say you want to set them up for a throw, or you're trying to move them out of the way, whatever it is.
It can be used in every scenario, but it's hard for people to do it because you have to hit right to the target, and that's when you hit. So you're not pushing in. So like what I was explaining earlier about the gravity, where you're folding here and it pushes you out. You don't need to do that with a drum head, like when you're saying the stick bounces off it, or a human body. It's just that we're trained to do that. So people can experience the power of what the percussion punch is, but to bring it into actually utilizing it and bringing it into real life is a little bit difficult. But not that difficult that you can't bring it into different phases of your life. It's funny, if you want to hear another story about my dad, all right?
A lot of very good stories about Sifu's dad.
Yeah, my dad was a pretty amazing guy. He was stabbed through the hand, shot, and just so many different things that happened to him, and he survived all of that. But this is what's funny, he couldn't survive his 17-year-old son. So my mom was a bit of an instigator. Should I talk to this then? My mom was a bit of an instigator, and so for some reason, I'm 17 years old, my hair was down to here, I had the chain belt, I was, a punk. But I thought it was a pretty cool punk. And I was sitting there, and I was training at that time, and I was about 17 years old, and Bruce Lee came out, and he was doing this 1-inch punch thing. So what he did was, if I can remember correctly, it was many, many years ago, he would take his fingers and put it here, then he would put his fingers, measure to the body, then he would go this way and hit. So there was a fight I was recently in where I did something like that, and I ended up putting the guy over the bar and through a wall. And I became a little bit of a legend, a 17-year-old maniac at that point. Nobody actually knew what I hit him with. I didn't even know what I hit him with. But I was practicing this concept way back then. So, I think you guys can appreciate how many years ago that was. I'm in my 60s now. I've been doing the arts for over 50 years. So it was a long time, so I've been working on it a long time. And I had this concept of it, and I was playing with it. And my mom goes to me, I was doing the dishes, and my father walks up to me as I'm doing the dishes, and you get some background on what my dad was like. He goes, "What is that bull crap that you're doing?" I'm using different words. That you do. I see you fighting all these guys. These guys come down, you're fighting out there 4 o'clock in the morning with people freaking knocking on your window to fight you. Look, what the, and I hear all this breathing and people like, "What are you doing?" My mom goes, "Well, he's doing Kung Fu." And he says, "What he's doing?" He says, "That's all bull crap, blah, 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 blah." And my mom goes, "Well, he has this punch, this 1-inch punch." That's what they call it, because I think that's what Mr. Lee called it back then. And he got this 1-inch punch where he can hit you, and you feel this blah, blah, blah. And I was really proud, and I was actually somewhat good because I was using Mr. Lee's method then, at that point. Of course, it evolved from that. But I was pretty good for a 17-year-old kid. I weighed like 130 pounds. But if you saw pictures of me back then, it was just all, muscle and just this lean fighting machine. And I was doing a lot of fighting, like my father was saying. Like, what are those people coming over your house 4 o'clock in the morning? He was really pissed off because I guess I woke him up. So, yeah, it's all crap. And he goes back into, we had this little house, my mom goes, "Well, it really works, blah, 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 blah." And he goes, "It's crap," and he leaves. And then I had a very bad temper, and I'm angry, and I don't know, like I said, I didn't even know why I was washing the dishes. That wasn't me, right? I don't know how that was happening or what it was. Maybe my mom asked me to do something, I don't know. And I'm like, washing this, I'm really mad now. My father comes back in. He goes, "Let me see this thing. This is all a bunch of bull crap, blah, blah, it doesn't work, blah, 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 blah." I said, "Well, Dad," he goes, okay. So I took Mr. Lee's stance. This is when I really started realizing that, maybe there's something more to this, where it advanced, right? So my father, we had this little kitchen, really tiny house, like I said, and I was in the kitchen, and there was this little adjacent room there. So he goes, "Go ahead, hit me with that." All right. So I remember taking the stance. I took the stance this way, and I go like this, just like what I think Mr. Lee did back then. Like I said, it's a lot of years. I went like this here, and I hit him. And it was so surreal, but I hit him with all this rage and anger, because my father used to always piss me off. We were always at battle with one another, right? Always fighting, always, blah, blah, blah. But he had a lot of respect for me, which I found out later on, especially after this, right? But I hit him with everything I had, but just like this, I just went like this here, which I don't do anymore, all right? That it's a whole new method now. But here, and he got hit with that, and he flew, literally flew. Like I hit him here, you know, and he flew. He went back and he was flying, and I can remember, like, oh my God, I just killed my dad, and it was so surreal. It was so surreal. It was like, whoa, and he's going back, and I'm going, whoa, and I'm trying to catch him, like, and I'm in my thought, it's like, oh, like I just killed my dad, and I'm trying to catch him, going, whoa, and I couldn't move fast enough to catch him, and he falls on the little table we had. Table falls over, all the chairs fall on him, and this, that, and the other thing, and and I'm like, oh, I'm moving the chairs, Dad, like I didn't realize what I did, like that it, you know, at that point, because all this rage was there as well, and my father, like, Dad, are you all right? And he goes like this, he's laying on the ground, when I get up, I'm gonna kill you. And my mom
Just
is
the guy with one look.
yeah, that's what I thought. I killed him, you know, like I didn't know, like, oh my God, I just killed my dad, you know. And he's like, when I get up, I'm gonna kill you. And I started laughing a little bit. You can't even move. I'm thinking to myself, you can't even move. You're gonna kill me when you get up. And my mom comes behind me, goes, you asked for that. He told you about that. You asked for it. You deserved it. And I realized my mom instigated this whole thing. I think she just wanted to see my father really get hit. And what happened, because she was always pissed off at him too. And he's like, I'm going to kill you. And that was the end of the story. That's when I really started to discover that there was some merit to it as well. Not the bar fight I was in, you know, where I was just hitting somebody. I just thought I had. But there was just, it was very focused, like I was here, and I just did that whole movement there. And of course, from that, it's developed into what it is today. There's no pushing involved with it. There's no pushing the body. Though I have to admit that a lot of times when I'm standing in front of, especially the big guys and stuff like that, I don't really want to hurt them. I push it a little bit, but then if they really want to see it, then I show them what it is about. But that's why I first do it as a touch, because you see it. And my punching
Still
speed,
really hurts when it's a touch.
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, and it just what I to show you what it's about, and then I try to get you to actually develop the explosion. So if you're hitting something, you want you can stay right there. If you're hitting something, you want to hit just to it. That's where it stops. And then there's this little like boom, pull back in. That's so the power of true punching or kicking is not on the forward motion, it's on the back motion.
And if you want to see just really in a really simple, descriptive way how what Sifu just did works, if you have access to a drum set, this is what I did when I first learned about it. Just take a stick and try to hit it, keeping in mind that you're trying to just stop it on the drum. And then just hit it like you would hit a drum normally, you will immediately see a very big difference.
Yeah, it's really dynamic. And then when you can bring other things into it, like it works on every part of the body, but it also works in the sense where it has to build on a theme. So if you're doing a percussion shot to a person's shoulder where their arm is, it's got to ricochet into another venue of attack. All right, so it is for Mortal Kombat, but the percussion punches are really real, and nobody does them. I don't know anybody that does it. The closest thing I've ever seen to is when I was 17 years old, it's like 17 years old when Mr. Lee was doing that 1-inch punch. And that was then where it was evolved to that point, which, you know, the story you just heard about my dad. And then I started really recognizing, when I started getting more into physics and as my brain grew, and started recognizing more about the world and how things work and energies, that's where, you know, I'm a very, I guess, I see things in symbols. So when I was sitting on the lake that one time and I threw the pebble in, it really started coming into it. And then the drumming, like you were just talking about, my father's saying, I started pulling all that together and dealing with the body as energy. And then back then, because I'm not, you know, back then I was called Little Tree and Mighty Mouse. Because I would fight guys that are much bigger and just take them out. And the whole thing is that it started developing back then, but I didn't really know it. You know, I was developing it because I wasn't pushing my punches because I wasn't a bigger guy. Now, of course I'm larger and stronger, but it was a whole different ball game then, and I was just hitting people and they were just falling, no matter how big they were, and that's where I started developing tough. So along with the percussion punching, with what I'm working with these guys now, with the assistants within systems, we have a thing called a 5-element form. I'm trying to get them to use and bring all the elements into their movement as well. Earth, fire, all that, all that stuff, except air, because air is not an element; it's an ether. Everything surrounds that. But in the Airbender, they were the most powerful ones. I guess maybe they were because they just commanded everything.
Well, that comes from the Indian version of the elements. So
Yeah.
they have the air, earth, water, and fire. Is the
actually, I didn't know that.
So that's in yoga and like the Ayurvedic medicine. That's
But
what
to
I
me,
from.
air is not an element. It's the ether that all the elements exist in. So when you could bring that into Mortal Kombat, which has always been my theme. When I started out 14 or 15 years old, and when I was fighting these bikers, I'm fighting guys at that age that were, 6'9", just huge, terrifying people. And yet, when I got out there and fought, I was fighting people all around the United States. They were bringing people into where I was training, which is at the YMCA in Metuchen. And they were bringing all these people in, and these bikers would come down and they would say, "I've never seen anybody as violent as you." And I said, "You stab people, you're much more violent than me. I've never seen anything like that, And but I started questioning it. I remember the day I questioned it. I was sitting down and I was watching these two guys fight, and huge guys. And the one guy, I think he did porn movies, right? He was six something, and you could hear his leg go. Like when he threw a kick, it was go.
Are you sure that was his leg sequel?
Yeah, and to give you an idea of what it was like back then. And so the Wing Chun, I don't know if that was real Wing Chun we were doing, but it was. I remember the forms were very Wing Chun, and the idea of Wing Chun is using a person's strength against them, which is great too, because we do that as well. So the whole thing here is I'm watching these guys fight, and I'm saying, if I didn't know these guys, and they weren't terrified of me, because I'm fast, and saying, could I really? This guy's legs go woof. You could hear the wind going through the leg, and the other guy was like 6'4" or something. He's fighting them, and they're just like you could hear their bodies like mixed martial arts. They're just like banging each other. I'm saying, would I be able to survive these guys in an alley? But this guy didn't know me, and he didn't know who I was. He wouldn't be afraid of me. He's this young, stupid kid. I'm going to kill this kid and move on, And I went, could I survive a stranger? Somebody who doesn't know? And then I said, and I'm watching these guys just hit each other. I said, and would my hits be powerful enough to hurt them? Because I was getting shots in, but would it be powerful enough to really hurt them? So I started questioning. At that point, I remember sitting cross-legged, watching these guys fight. Like, I'm going to go and discover what the arts is about. And then soon after that, because I opened up that can of worms within the Matrix, right? I started meeting people that were real serious fighters, that were really like more dangerous than these guys. And I started investigating, and my motto at that time was I'll fight anywhere, anybody, anywhere, anytime. Didn't matter where. That's where my father got pissed off. Where you got these people coming? Yeah, people would have bets. They would have bets on who's going to win. And you get a tap on my window at 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, this guy wants to fight you. I would just crawl out my window and go fight. I would go right through the window because I didn't want to disturb my father, but apparently I was anyway because you just hear all this grunting and stuff in the backyard. People go, yeah, So yeah. So anyway, that's how it all began. But the percussion punching is real, and when you bring the physics and everything that you're saying into it, it's just not that easy. You'll see the concept of it, you'll feel it, you'll experience it, and then to bring it into real life is a little bit difficult, And like I said, when I first started, I did Mr. Lee's, 5 Fingers of Death, which is a great video or movie you should watch. Old-fashioned movie, but it's terrible, but it's great. But the whole thing is like, boom, when I hit that way, I hit and I hit with that percussion, not knowing that's what I was doing. And that's when all of that stuff started to come together. That's how it actually developed. And the journey that I took, like when I was 14, is the martial arts real? And I think that's what's changed a lot today. And that's why I'm asking people to write in, we'll formulate something and we'll get everybody together and I'll actually show you. And I think it's something you more have to stand in front of. I could demonstrate it a little bit, but it's not as believable as when you're standing in front of me, you know, or somebody that could do that. That's why I'm inviting everybody down. And the reason I made this decision is because right now we're developing the systems within systems into making it a whole,
Like a school, like a
Like,
club.
like an actual
yeah,
defined art.
a defined art. And I'm doing this also because I'm getting older, or I am older. And I always kept this, but I think it needs to get out there, that people could see it from all walks of life. So whatever your experiences are, if you are interested in this, write in and we'll get back to everybody. Once we organize it, we'll get a place where everybody can come down and you can actually see it. You can meet me, you can meet the other people and really start to understand what you experienced 15 years ago, or what Rhino experienced when he called me up. He goes, yeah, I remember you hit me with that thing and, you know, I was on the other side of the room. You know, but some people deserve that. You know, I don't do that. What I do is I demonstrate you how it works, sees it, then you see it in action, and you go, okay, you get it. You get
On
it.
that note, if you'd like to write into us and get involved in this at all, see what the Percussion Punch is all about, write into growlearnteachbreathe@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you.
Right. And there's a lot of old videos out there.
So in the comments for this podcast, we'll include the links to our old videos, to the email, to our website. So you have a lot of platforms to reach out on to us from.
So do you guys think I covered everything? Okay.
Yeah.
Is
That was a great
everything-
introduction.
We did all right. We did all right. You guys, hopefully you like that. You know, hopefully I get to meet the people that are really interested in it. You know, and really get to see what it's really about. You know, and from all walks of life, I'm saying you could be a tennis player, you could be a basketball player, football player, football guys. You could be a Navy SEAL. You could be mixed martial art. The top guys out there. You could be. It doesn't matter. It's all irrelevant to what is going to be coming at you when you're standing in front of it. And that's what I want everybody to see. And then if you want to take it to another level, then of course we'll try to do everything to get you there. I don't really have a school. I am working on getting one maybe by the end of the year. I never did have a school. Everything I did was very small and compact, and basically I'm just teaching 4 people right now. But I thought that this stuff needs to get out there before I'm either too old to do it or too old to care. I would think it'd probably be too old to care. I don't think
Probably too old
you're
to care.
too old to
Come
care.
first.
And I'm really trying to start a community of martial artists that are looking to bring a different level of excellence to their abilities other than competition. All right? Is that good? Yeah?
Yeah.
Can we end it?
I think that's a great place, man.
Okay. Grow, learn, teach. Bye-bye, everyone.